Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we bring in the experts to share their stories of the celebrations and struggles of one of the most important industries in the U.S., multifamily property management. I'm joined today by Ryan Calhoun, Regional Director of Operations at Landmark Properties, where he leads with a sharp focus on student housing and operational excellence. Beyond his day-to-day role, Ryan serves as president of his local apartment association and is a passionate advocate for bridging the gap between legislation and property management. With firsthand experience navigating complex policies from California rent control to Ann Arbor's right to renew ordinance, Ryan has developed resources to help operators stay ahead of these big changes. He's also a strong believer in catered coaching, a leadership style that I personally love that tailors mentorship to individual learning and communication styles. So today, we're going to explore how Ryan is channeling his passion for creating success for both owners and renters to drive impact at the intersection of legislation, leadership, and innovation in the multifamily space. And we're also going to discuss how his leadership style has transformed over the past few years and this cool catered coaching approach. If you're passionate about the impact of legislation on our industry, you won't want to miss this episode. Now, before we get started, we're sponsored today by the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for affordable owners and operators. Fortress revolutionizes affordable management with features focused on automating housing assistance charges and payments to keep your ledgers clean and accurate, centralizing file reviews and document storage through Fortress in a partnership with AWS, and a free in-system smart waitlist to ensure your property stays in compliance. And don't forget, if you like what you hear today, please like, subscribe, and share with someone you think would enjoy this episode. So, Ryan, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kerri.
I'm really excited to jump into this conversation because I actually haven't had a guest yet who has been as passionate about legislation and the impact of our local organizations in legislation. So I'm excited to dig into that with you. But before we get started, can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you actually got your start in the industry?
Yeah, there's I guess maybe a joke within student housing, and it probably spreads over to multifamily as well. But we always say we fell into the industry,
Yeah.
and that's the similar case for me. I got an email from the landlord about jobs and rental discounts, and being offered, which is unique to housing as an employer, and
Yeah.
so you know it's maybe surprising when you've kind of seen me, but I did a lot of like landscaping and farming and lots of physical labor jobs, which I loved. But my wife was like, hey, now wife, at the time girlfriend, was like, hey, you would really like this. I think you'd be good at this and you should apply. And so I did. And I fell in love with the pace, the really just the kind of fast-paced environment. And it felt like every day it was something new. I was wearing a different hat and you're learning and adapting and this incredibly dynamic field. So I always left work feeling like I ran a marathon, but I chased that feeling. It was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good analogy because student housing is different. Now, have you
Yeah.
managed any multifamily housing or just student?
Yeah, so I've had and obviously we lease to anyone who qualifies, so you can
Yeah.
have anyone there. But we have had some that caters to a more multifamily environment.
Yeah.
Some states, for example, require joint and several leasing, which is more traditional to multifamily. And student housing, we often offer individualized contracts, so it's a little
Yeah.
bit different, but it does cater to student environment.
Yeah. So is the pace of the assets that cater to multifamily different than the pace of those that cater to student?
I think everyone feels like they always have I don't want to say they use the word important, but certainly a difficult job or a fast job.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't want to
No, not at all.
downplay
Well,
multifamily or anything,
they're
but
going to be
I
different for different reasons, right?
yeah,
But you use the word
exactly.
pace, which I loved. So,
Yes, yes. But it is just incredibly fast paced, right? I think that, students are, moving around and doing a lot of things and coming in and out and maybe doing lease takeovers and things. We see natural throughout, nationwide, less renewals than you see with multifamily
yep.
from different industry perspective.
What is that? What
And
is the renewal percentage
the
for?
a good one for like students would be like 20 to 30%
Oh,
for
yeah.
yeah, and that's really low, right, for
Yeah.
multifamily, but that's if you got a 30% renewal on student property, people are going to be pretty thrilled.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it is that it's a lot of new leasing and a lot of students that are maybe going to a different college or taking on their first career or graduating, things like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I've heard, I was actually had a podcast with someone who started, well, he actually got his first start in multifamily operations. He'd been on the tech side, but on the operations side on student asset. And someone actually was like, you don't know anything about what we do here until you've been through a leasing, like a turn season for student
Right.
housing. And he was like, well, I was in the restaurant industry and I've been through Mother's Day brunch. So, like, I can tell you, I understand fast pace. So I'm here for it. Let's
That's a
go.
good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, it was good. But I've heard I've never been involved in student, so that's one of the asset classes that I've not had the pleasure of being involved in. But I have heard those turn seasons and leasing seasons can be
Yeah,
intense. So
turns a lot. Usually a couple weeks between,
yeah,
80 to 70% of your residents are moving in and out. So that doesn't leave you with a whole lot of time to turn a whole lot of beds. So
yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. So tell me a little bit about what you do today. So what's your focus at Landmark today?
yeah, so I'm a regional director of operations, as you had mentioned. I oversee 6 sites for us, kind of spanning from Pennsylvania and Ann Arbor. And I oversee, at its title, operations, but that kind of includes everything that goes on day to day within the office side of things for all of those sites. So making sure that they're all doing what they're supposed to, but also giving them a great resource and coaching platform.
Yeah. Okay. And do you, at Landmark and on your sites, do you guys operate on a fully decentralized model or do you guys have any sort of elements of centralization?
We actually have just started to integrate a centralization team.
Yeah.
We've had lots of elements, but we just kind of fully separated its own team. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's probably an interesting change in workflow for your teams.
Yeah, no, I think I was working with a vendor recently and just kind of hearing their spiel and that's kind of one of the things that a lot of the industry is seeing is AI integration, centralization, and some of these what he referred to as buzzwords.
Hmm.
And you kind of navigate towards that for interest in new vendors and things.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Well, aside from your position at Landmark, you are currently the president of your local, or I guess your state apartment association
The
chapter.
local, yep,
Local.
yep.
Okay.
So Michigan does have several local and then also a state representation for NAA.
Okay.
Some states have one, for example, I mentioned I was over PA. Pennsylvania has one state organization. There are no
Mhm.
kind of smaller local factions.
Okay.
But yeah, I have the Washtenaw Area Apartment Association, which is mostly kind of Ann Arbor is the largest city within it, and then kind of some smaller neighboring cities.
Okay. And when did you actually join that local chapter?
Yeah, so it's actually only been a couple of years. I did join the state and the local around the same time, and really with interest in, as you mentioned, legislation. It sounds really boring to a lot of us, but
Mhm.
I think once I began to understand the impact, it became more and more interesting for me and something to see the connection that I really loved.
Yeah, understand the impact. When did that happen for you?
So it was 2019, actually. So just a little prior to COVID, they started an ordinance in Ann Arbor that was majorly impactful, called the Renewal Ordinance, and that really changed the game for a lot of operators within the market. And it was kind of one of the first ones to change operations so much that it affected me as at the time, just one of the managers on site, and it
Okay.
wasn't looking at maybe this large scale um, dollar, but more minute details of leasing, for example, at the time.
So tell me a little bit about that ordinance. What was it and how did it impact you?
Yeah, so the right to renew ordinance, the goal of it is to kind of slow um, the pace at which leasing occurs and allow residents to renew later in the leasing term. So what it does is it requires us to essentially guarantee their space. The original legislation piece was 180 days at the end of their contract is when we could essentially offer it to a new tenant. So this did hit we call them like independent rental owners very hard because a lot of the legislation was built around, you can't tour the unit while residents are still living there until that period. And for example, with some of the or majority of the kind of larger rental companies, we do have model units, and so
Mhm.
it had a really big impact to the independent rental owners, which um, we kind of see the increasing legislation gear towards having a more holistic approach over the last several years.
This is so interesting. I had never heard of an ordinance like this. We don't, my company has never managed in Michigan. So where do you think what do you think pushed the lawmakers to introduce this bill or ordinance actually even into policy? Like, where's it coming from?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, the intent behind any ordinance or any law, a lot of times when it comes from um, the rental industry or is targeted at the rental industry, I should say, is to make housing more accessible for either lower income, maybe previous criminal records. And, for this one in particular, it was to make it accessible for students so they don't feel like they have to move around, and they feel like they can kind of stay in one place and make their decision over a longer period of time. So, the intent was to try to give some strength back to the students. And we had talked a little bit about unintended consequences, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, these admirable programs oftentimes do the opposite of their intent.
Yeah. So that's a great point. How did you see this play out? What actually did happen?
Yeah, so definitely unintended consequences, increased rental costs across the market. Students were left scrambling kind of because the landlord, would hope that they had a floor plan or something available, but then another student ended up wanting to renew right towards that deadline.
Hmm.
We were fortunate enough that, as I had mentioned, we were able to navigate the space with, help of some great boots on the ground and staying organized and keeping a high level renewal percentage, which maybe not high level to multifamily, but
Hmm.
it did satisfy both our current residents and our incoming prospects. But some of the smaller kind of mom and pops, if you will, which there are a lot in this market, it became very straining on their operations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's what pushed you to move towards,
Yeah,
I guess at first being involved, and now, of course, having a voice in the
yeah,
legislature.
yeah.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you today? So how are you um, impacting change, or what is your involvement like, especially as the president of your local association?
Yeah, I was going to point to that. Normally, you may not have the chance to have an impact on these things as a normal operator or kind of know where a lot of these things are. But luckily, the National Apartment Association has built a very robust system.
Mm.
It obviously has other sides of it, education and such. But really, the big one for me that I found a passion with was legislation and kind of utilizing their resources of, they know a lot of when things are going to happen, when certain legislatures are going to be open to speaking. They have the contacts in those, um, and building on that, creating my own kind of working with them to say, hey, maybe we talk to this person or maybe we talk to that person. So utilizing what they've already built as a great foundation to continue to build some more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And obviously through this, you've learned a lot about different legislation and the impact that it has. So you have brought up rent control and what
Hmm.
that looks like, and obviously that's happening across the United States right now, and a lot of municipalities are introducing bills and ordinances or legislation to um, enact some form of rent control. So where are you seeing that happen right now, and what do you think the impacts of it are?
Sure. I think, we're seeing it in a lot of different markets and, obviously as rising costs of everything we're seeing around our groceries and, everyone knows it. They are spending more money on those, monthly costs that they don't necessarily want to. So, and rent's one of them too, as we see more operational costs. So, it's hard. We obviously, as landlords get to have this really great insight, but renters unfortunately don't have that. So, they do speak to their different legislative members to try to have an impact on that. Speaking a little bit on the impacts, I think in a lot of the markets we see less development with continued demand for which ends up leading to a lot of higher pricing. So
Yeah.
the goal of rent control to control rent and unfortunately, decrease quality a lot of times too, with properties that are kind of decentivized to do upgrades because they can only, go so far with their money and becoming advantageous to do luxury new builds, tear down some maybe the more affordable housing and I certainly don't want to take credit for a lot of this is certainly reported by Mary Donovan, for example, or Nam Pham, their PhD in 2023, I want to say. There was an article that was done by NAA. And there's also Leah Kofi, I want to say her name was. She did a lot with research with the NAA more recently and came out with a similar sentiment. Um, one of them, I think there was a recent study, and I'm throwing out a lot of names here, but Daniel
That's
Shog
great.
and Izzy Roman from MetroSite put out a very interesting one. And to kind of paraphrase it, they looked at statistics from income source, screening laws, and they looked at around 750,000 units across the US for about a 15-year period and they found increased vacancy, staff burden,
Mm,
increased costs. Some of the things that might be hard for them to measure that I've noticed personally is increased strain from, more training costs for the teams. And, these local apartment associations, I've certainly seen it from ours, is they see a lot of people reaching out saying, I need guidance on this. I just don't know how to
yeah.
navigate this. And it's not always cheap to sit down with an attorney for a long period of time and train your employees. So, we kind of leverage that. And yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's a really interesting take on it, and I actually appreciate you sharing all those names and all those studies. I would
yeah,
love after this, if we could link these with your podcast. That would be fantastic.
yeah,
I have a
that'd be
feeling
awesome.
those are articles that a lot of people would really love to read. And I do think it's interesting. I mean, there's this concept of housing as a right, in this nation, and sometimes almost like a forced right. Where we are essentially saying, at least a lot of cities, Nashville being one of those, where we're making it almost impossible to be homeless. There's nowhere where anyone is allowed to reside anymore, um,
Right,
in the homeless status. So it's like housing as a right or a forced right, but. And so we're trying to maintain the affordability of it, when the average housing costs just do not equate to average incomes. But I think that you're right. We need to look at the right way to do this. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying, I don't know, to be honest with you. And I'm not sitting here saying that rent control in and of itself is absolutely the wrong decision. But I do see where, it's a supply and demand issue. And if you're not allowed
right.
to build assets that generate enough income to cover the cost of building the asset or the interest rate moving forward, then we're not going to build assets and we're never going to have affordability. So it's a big problem.
Yeah, and I think naturally with a lot of the newer legislation, you maybe become a little bit pessimistic, but looking back, it's some of our foundational fair housing laws, and a lot of these are what guide us, in our practices and our trainings, and they are great, but unfortunately, kind of some of them lead to a different direction,
Yeah.
just by maybe not fully understanding, legislators maybe not fully understanding the space and kind of what that
Yeah.
might actually mean in practice.
Yeah, agreed. It's so important to always think about both things, intent and impact.
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot with my 14-year-old too. Like it's just across the
Yeah,
board. It's a good thing
it's
to
a big
think
one.
about. Yeah, in life. How are you? So, obviously you are involved in your local apartment association, and
Hmm.
you are, really starting to understand the intention and the impact of a lot of the ordinances or the bills or just overall legislation that's happening right now. So, what are you doing specifically, or what is your local apartment association doing specifically, or the state, to that you're seeing to actually create change or to have a bigger
Yeah.
impact?
No, it's a great question. There's a lot of things we can do, so and we are doing, and it's almost easier to say what we aren't doing. And
Mm.
so, one of the things we're trying to get the word out there in all sorts of different marketing, same way that we market our properties, to educate. That's certainly one aspect of it, and also work with the legislators themselves as much as we can. There's several opportunities within the NAA to get in front of legislators, both at state and federal level.
Yeah.
But even local level, just sitting down and, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was sitting down with a few members of the city of Ann Arbor. I won't give any names or too much specifics there, but having great conversations about, hey, this is something that we're looking to put in, and us having the opportunity to say, this is how this will impact the
Hmm.
renters.
Hmm.
And would love to have renters there, but unfortunately, sometimes they maybe don't understand how that fully circles back. So it's kind of having all the voices be heard, and that's really the biggest way that we can make an impact. So I thought I mean, we all left the meeting sitting much happier than we did before, right?
Yeah.
The city or the legislators are kind of like, hey, we want to have this impact, and we know we're going to get resistance from it, and we're kind of in the same boat where we know we're going to have, differing opinions on it and
Yeah.
operational challenges. So let's sit down together and think about how we can do this to both have the common goal of a better rental experience.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so great. The opportunity to sit down in front of the legislature and actually share, what the downstream impact is going to be. That a lot
Yeah,
of times they don't have the insight to. I mean, I don't mean to use the word ignorant in a derogatory way. It's just you're just literally lacking the knowledge of what actually happens on site. So,
yeah.
having that's fantastic. So how are you translating all of this back to Landmark, right? I mean, I'm assuming that this position and what you're doing today is having a positive impact on Landmark and what you do with them. So how are you helping Landmark and maybe even at any other companies now with
Yeah.
this knowledge and experience?
No, that's a great question. So my goal is to combine my love for teaching, and basically create a lasting impact for those, not just within my company and within Landmark, but legislatively across maybe the nation, and work with the NAA to kind of create a program that does help. And again, I kind of go back to the education piece of it, the legislation piece of it, kind of having multiple ways of impact, and really kind of creating a lasting effort, towards helping both really honestly, the renters long term, but helping the operators in the markets be able to operate within the space and
Yeah.
navigate some of these challenges, but work with those and kind of lead into a future of understanding and communication.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. And then you mentioned being passionate about teaching. And so I'm going to take this back to the introduction where I
Yeah.
referenced something that I'm excited to talk about actually, because you and I were just chatting about the things that you're passionate about. And you use this phrase that I don't think you've coined yet, but I think you should.
Yeah.
I guess I'm coining it for you that describes a methodology of leading and managing a team that I think is really beautiful. It's really thoughtful and it's really specific as to what you're doing. And so you called it catered coaching. So you used that phrase with me. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I think it all starts with, first of all, caring personally and getting to know your team. I always start when I have a brand new, we call them community managers or general managers, right? I always start by asking what their goals are, what they love to do in their free time, how they learn, how they organize, what they look for in a boss. A lot of these questions that no, they're not this metric or, this, issue that's going on at the site. But what that does long term is it makes every single one-on-one going forward more fruitful.
Yeah,
And it just makes a better relationship with your team. And that is actually from Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And I'll throw out some other books. So,
go for it.
we'll
I
keep
love
them
it.
coming. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
keep them coming.
Yeah. No.
Um, but yeah, I think so on, on my end, I don't think there's a singular like recipe like cooking where it's like this tastes good. I think it's always different. Maybe people have a different taste. They want it more spicy or whatever. So, my background's more from kinesiology. But similar to that, there's no one workout program that works for everybody. Um, you know, Otherwise everyone would be doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
otherwise it's P90X and everyone does that, right? But I think, organization, learning, all these things can kind of look different. Um, Many of my CMs do different things. They either use Outlook or Google Calendar or physical calendar, or maybe they use a different task management like Asana or Microsoft to do some of these ones. And what we kind of have to do as leaders is take the time to understand, are they a visual learner, or sometimes they need more hands-on efforts. And as managers, we just have to adjust to the person in front of us and take ownership of teaching, and why someone or understand why someone may learn a different task, or why they might be a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And I think all of that kind of wraps up into really empowering your employees and allowing them to take extreme ownership in their way. And I use extreme ownership. Great book on that is by Jocko
Yeah.
Willink and Leif Babin. They do Extreme Ownership is the book title.
Yeah.
I actually had the ability to Echelon Front is their kind of company, and
Yep.
they've done work with a lot of businesses, but had the ability to sit down and had Echelon Front at one of my conferences, and that was phenomenal, by the way.
Oh,
So
that's
highly
incredible. I'm
recommend.
a
Yeah.
huge fan of Jocko and his books. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was great. I couldn't agree with you more. I love the concept of this catered coaching approach. And I had never put it in as that phrase, but I joke a lot. I mean, I joke, but with all seriousness, I am a terrible manager and I'm an okay leader. I think I'm okay. I think sometimes I shine and sometimes I fall on my face, but like I'm fine. I'm an okay leader. But I think I'm a really, really, really good partner. And I would prescribe it to that exact reason because I just know my team members so well and I know their strengths and weaknesses and I just know who they are as humans. So I know where I need to help them all the time. So, like, I know when I need to step in and take projects over from them, or if I need to provide them with more resources on something specific, or if they just need to. I mean, just bitch for an hour. Like sometimes I
Yeah.
just have team members like that. Or if
Yep.
there's someone that I just need to take to dinner and talk them off the ledge because they've been so stressed out and working so hard. If you just know them as humans, it's amazing how you can ensure that they stay focused and happy and that they enjoy their jobs. If you're there to partner with them, to just be by their side for whatever it is that they need. But you have to intimately know your team in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think you caught the right word, that they're human, and that we have to
Yeah,
understand that people learn at different paces, but they just learn in different ways. And what we can
yeah,
do as, coaches or mentors or teachers to cater to that and offer catered
yeah.
coaching as we've coined. So,
Yeah, yeah, as we've coined. This is going to be all over this LinkedIn post, just
yep.
so you're ready for
Copyright
it. Yeah.
done.
Love it. Love it. Well, uh, you know, and I also love, I'm going to go back to this for a second. I really love the fact that you equated it to your background, your experience in kinesiology, that, every human body is different. And so there has to
Yep.
be a custom plan to it. But then I will go back to, you, especially the fact that you brought up radical candor, because radical
Yeah.
candor is not a universal communication method. That's for sure. Like there,
Interesting.
there are some people, right, who aren't necessarily ready for that. So is that a
Yeah.
practice that you utilize?
It
And
is
if,
it is a foundation for me. Yes.
okay,
I
love
don't mean
it.
to interrupt, but I'm very
No,
excited
please.
about that book. It's not gonna be my top one when you ask that, but it's really something early on in my career. I want to say probably like 8 years ago. I mean, I don't know how new it was at the time, but I had read it, and I practiced it to some extent. I had tried to get to know people personally, but I think really taking the time and realizing how important it is. Like it is the foundation. It's not
Yeah,
just a piece of the puzzle to understand someone. It is how you can interact and communicate with them.
yeah,
And I think that's so important. It was kind of one of those eye openers for me, and a great read.
yeah, yeah. But how do you make sure? First of all, I agree with you completely.
Yeah,
I would actually argue that I go beyond radical candor. Like it, I do love the concept. I really do. But I'm
sure.
a little bit edgier with it, maybe even.
Okay.
So, but I will say, not everyone responds well to that, especially at first, right? Like a lot of people are not used to like extremely kind of like
Direct.
raw, direct feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you combine that sort of like I say extreme leadership. I mean, it's not that extreme, but it is in its own
Yeah.
unique way. Because again, I go back to, so many people have worked at companies for so long where you don't talk about things. Like we're
Yeah.
not that clear and open. So then how do you combine that with the catered coaching?
Oh, yeah, great question. So, well, I think two parts. One, at its core, getting to know them personally. I think that helps a lot with it. If you are really direct with someone, they will know that you've had enough communication, you've built that relationship, and that's going to be fine to have that direct conversation with them because they know who you are, and that's not you being rude. That's just genuinely a conversation that's got to be had quickly and to get it across the board. So I think that's,
Yeah.
at its foundation of what radical candor is. I think that's a big reason and a big help for why it's successful. And then to kind of go back to the catered coaching portion of it, catering how direct you are with certain individuals, right? Like some people are going to take that one or two sentence, like this is what I need from you, and they're not maybe going to take it maybe because you haven't built that relationship or haven't found that connection yet, or maybe that's just who they are, and maybe you need to kind of dial it back just slightly until you can kind of build that relationship. So kind of catering again to the person in front of us and making sure that our coaching is what they need.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So I'm looking at my phone right now, but I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention to you. There's a book that I'm reading right now that is so interesting, that has a lot of these concepts in it. And so I want to, but it's not, I mean, it's in, you might laugh when you hear the title. But I'm almost done with it. And honestly, over the past like 2 weeks has transformed a lot of the communication I'm having with my kids, because of this. But it's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And I've started to deploy even just a few of the it kind of highlights in the book of methods of communication with both my 14-year-old, who now has talked to me more over the past 2 weeks than he ever has, and my almost 4-year-old, who is like coming down off of temper tantrums much more quickly because of the way that I'm communicating with him. So, to your point of catered coaching and understanding the individual, and you know how you communicate with someone and understanding that book is a phenomenal resource. So, if you have kids, I would recommend anyone read it. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you have kids or not. It's just about how to talk to people, in general, and make sure that you're truly listening to people, and then empathizing with them, and then they understand, they feel heard before you start to actually communicate back with them. So I love that.
No, it's a good point. And I think, a lot of times at the core of maybe heightened emotions, we often revert back to maybe childish behavior, I would
Agreed.
say.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that
Yes.
we have to kind of understand that a lot of these tools are meant for that. So I think, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great. Like I mean, I have children too, but for those that maybe don't, reading those books isn't a bad thing because you're
Yeah.
learning conversations that you may actually have with very professional people. So
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That's so well said. When any of us are threatened or the situation is heightened, we do revert back to, that inner self that is normally decades younger.
I have like a very random like fact I want to say, and I have no source for this because it's very random off the top of my head. But one of the things that I had learned about some point in my degree was people when they're sick often like revert back to foods that are safe for them,
Hmm.
which is often foods that they ate as a child. And that's kind of like ingrained in our, human DNA, if you will, for a long time, where if we feel like we got sick, maybe we ate the wrong thing, drank the wrong thing. So we revert back to that like childish food. And maybe you're eating chicken nuggets or something when you just got better from the flu. And I think that's very similar aspect where we kind of revert
Yeah.
back to maybe some of these child behaviors because maybe we felt like those were safe or those were the right conversations or got us through quicker, and we have to use those tools to kind of get us out.
Yeah, I love that. Though this was a really great conversation, Ryan. I really appreciate everything that you've shared about, your experience and your passion for the legislature and your experiences in it and how it's making a difference. And like I said, this new term, catered coaching, I absolutely love it. And so you have a lot of the data and knowledge to back it up. But before we sign off, I have my two questions for you. So
Yep.
I'll start with a fun one. So tell us a story. I have a feeling with your experience in student
Yeah.
housing, you're going to be able to share a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I had to really dig deep and think of some ones that were funny and maybe had some sort of meaning to them, other than just being funny or what have
Okay.
you, and also appropriate because there's a lot of things in student housing that might not be appropriate. So,
It's an
um,
adult audience.
yeah,
I drop the
yeah,
F-bomb
yeah,
every once in a while. It's okay
that's
if you want
fair.
it to be
That's fair.
inappropriate.
So I got a call from a resident, and I won't say who I was working for at the time or what property or what that looked like, but I got a call from a resident, and the resident had a rodent in their apartment, they were obviously very concerned, and I just happened to be at the front desk. It was kind of one of those things, all hands on deck sometimes, and I was actually the community manager at the time, so. But again, extreme ownership. I took ownership and I said, okay, let me take care of this for you, and ran up there, and all I had was the top of a printer paper box, um, and I can't remember something else to kind of slide underneath it to capture this rodent. Don't ask me why I thought this was a great idea, and maybe calling like a pest control was not the better approach, but let's do it, right? So I went up there, and the girl was like, "Hey, I already got it trapped, and it's under this trash can," and I'm like, "Awesome, that's great." Let me just slide this little, piece of paper underneath it. I'll slide the box on top. And so I capture the rodent and I bring it back down and I have intentions of releasing it. And I'm kind of peeking in at this. And at this point, my maintenance supervisor was about ready to leave for the day. It was towards the end of the day. And so he catches up with me and he's kind of peeking in at some of the holes in the box. And he was like, "That's not a rodent. That's a hamster. Like that's someone's pet." And yeah. And so at the time, I'm like, "Oh no. Like what did I just do?" But the girl in the apartment was like, "No, it's a rodent," and she was very confident in that. And so, and she didn't have any clearly pets. Her door was wide open. There was no, cages or anything like that. So I was like, okay. And there's, no registered animals or anything at this. So now I'm starting to panic. So what am I going to do with a hamster? I can't just release it now. It's not like a dog or something where you can, maybe take it to a local humane society. And my maintenance supervisor at the time, I didn't have any kids and he did. And I was like, "So you want to take it?" And he looked at me and he was like, "Absolutely not." And within a few minutes later, and I was panicking, we have it in the box. I'm sitting there kind of like frustrated with myself, just not knowing what to do, mix of emotions. And I get a call from another resident, and they're like, really panicking and upset. I can almost hear them like crying over the phone, and they're like, "My hamster got loose, and I think you guys have it. I just want to make sure like you guys didn't like, basically release it or anything like that." And I'm like, "Okay, we're good. We're good. We got the owner of the
Oh.
hamster. We'll deal with the problem of it not being registered and all that good stuff later." But we found the hamster's home and got it back to him. And I think the lesson that I learned is, we can get so focused in on our problems and what little things are going on that we don't take a step back and look holistically and say, okay, maybe there's other, because if we'd have captured it and put it right in there, we'd have saved so much headache.
Yeah.
But we just got to take that holistic approach and take a step back with things. So,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a
yeah.
great story. That's a great story. I have to admit, when I was in college, if I'd seen a hamster in my unit, I would have thought it was a rodent too.
Oh
I've
yeah,
never had
100%.
hamsters growing up. I wouldn't
Yep.
have known what that was.
I don't know. Yeah, not for me.
I've been like, well, it's the cutest rat I've ever seen, but it's clearly a rat. So,
Right.
yeah. Oh, good story. And I'm sure you have plenty more from your student housing
Oh
days. I
yeah.
can't even imagine. So, well, Ryan, now that you and I have talked books, and I love both of the books you've already talked about, I'm really excited to hear. What is your book recommendation for our listeners?
Yeah, so let me preface this a little bit. I did throw out several book titles, and so you
Yeah.
might think I've been a reader my whole life and I love reading. But actually, just a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, I hadn't read a book cover to cover, unless it was like kids' book or something for my kids in almost 9 years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so last 3 years I've read a book. I wouldn't say every month because there's a couple months where I'll winter getting sick with kids and things. But
Yeah.
if you haven't read Atomic Habits, and this isn't going to be the
Mm,
one that I talk about, but just kind of a snippet from that, just taking everything one day at a time and
yeah.
reading a page a day, eventually get yourself in the mindset of being a reader. So I want to preface it. I threw out a lot of books there, but I was not a reader, and I've become one. So. Um, Definitely a great book, but actually, ironically, David and I think Kindheart was the one of your
Yeah.
podcasts more recently. He had
Yes.
brought up Think
Aeon.
Again.
Yeah.
Totally stole the one that I had when we originally talked, and I was like, shoot, okay, well, one of the ones that I'm reading right now is called Let Them, and it's
Yeah.
by Mel
Mel
Robbins.
Robbins. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. for those who haven't read it or heard of her, New York Times bestseller. She's done
Yeah.
TED Talks, and one of them was like how to stop screwing yourself over. She has also the 5 second rule, which a lot of people maybe have started to hear about a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's a fairly large one, and honestly, her bio is a read in itself.
Yeah.
But she went from being this kind of, she was, and she alludes to it in the book, so I don't want to tell too much, but tremendous, tremendous debt. She was actually a criminal defense attorney or like legal analyst or something for CNN by trade. So, but she was really successful, and she credited a lot of that to kind of this book, The Let Them Theory. And a little bit insight onto that. Let them, being flexible to kind of allow people to maybe have different decisions than you or different views. And the second part of that is let me, which is giving you control back and recognizing and framing your efforts towards that. So kind of a different framework of mindset and how you approach things.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite books that I've read over the past 12 months, hands down, easy.
Yeah,
And mainly, she starts off with the story of like how this book came to be, which is where
right.
her son was like going to
At the prom.
prom. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I
Yep.
couldn't remember if it was
Yeah.
prom or homecoming. But and whereas with her daughters, she had spent months prepping, right? Like scheduling the hair
Yes.
appointment and going
Months and
dress
months and
shopping
months.
and all these things. Yes. And then with her son, he didn't do anything to prepare for it until like the week before. And he's like, I want
Yeah.
this suit and these sneakers. And she like went out of her way to try to figure it out. And then all the kids come to their house the day of, and they're all about to leave. And she's like, well, where are you going to eat? And they're like, well, we don't know. We might go over to this taco place. And she starts to flip out internally because she's like, the taco place doesn't have enough room for you guys. I can't believe you didn't make a reservation. And she's flipping out. And her other daughters, or one of her daughters, is like tugging on her arm. And she's like, Mom, like, shut the hell up. Like, settle down. What do you
Yep.
care if that's what they
Yep.
do? Like,
Let them do it.
let him do it. And then it starts pouring outside. And then she's like, oh my God, he's going to run out there through the mud in the rain with those new sneakers I bought him. She's like still flipping out. And her daughter is just like, let them do their thing. Like, what does this matter to you? And so she had
Yep.
just like this like moment in her life where she was like, why am I obsessing about all of these things? And it's creating negative energy for me, for him, my relationship with him. It's like, anyway, I do. I absolutely love, love, love that book, and the ability to allow your life to evolve and happen around you without having to get involved in all of the feelings or emotions or thoughts that happen in your head. So I
Yeah.
absolutely love it.
Yeah, I have one more story if we have enough
Yeah,
time.
go
I
for
don't know.
it.
Yeah.
We do.
So it did lead me into things you were talking about the prom situation. My senior year of prom. This is just a really funny story. It has nothing to do with work, but he so I got done. I played rugby in high school, and we got done with our kind of like state championship type stuff. And so going back to my house, getting ready for prom, kind of in a rush and everything. And I'm sitting there, and I had a truck at the time, and I'm sitting there in my tuxedo, ready to head to the house that we're, meeting up at to get in the fancy cars and stuff like that. And I look over, and I lived kind of lived out in the country, and I had this field of like some taller grass, and I said to myself, how often can you say that you have gone through a field like mud bogging, if you will, in a tuxedo, and how many opportunities do you have that in your lifetime? So. I gave it a whirl, and needless to say, I did not make it all the way through. I was stuck about three-quarters of the way, and very interesting call to my parents. Hey, I'm stuck in the middle of this field. Can you come get me? And my dad's kind of like, "What? Where are you? What are you doing?" Um, but they came and got me, and they got me over there, and they got me unstuck, and my truck looked very cool with all the mud on it. And but they really kind of gave that epitome of the let them theory. They didn't
Oh,
get
love that.
mad, they weren't
Yeah.
upset. They got me there, and I was there on time still. And that's really kind of what it boiled down to is they said, okay, he made the mistake, but I'll tell you, I haven't mud bogged in a tuxedo before again. So I learned from it.
That's fantastic. Honestly, I feel like the biggest compliment that could be given to your parents is the fact that they are who you called. Not a friend
Yeah.
with another truck, but that you
No,
actually
yeah.
called your parents. Like that's a big deal. Like that's what I hope for. That's what I aspire to with my two boys is that they'll call me.
No, that's a great point. I mean, that's honestly a great point. Like, hopefully, as parents, we do get that call from our
Yeah.
kids, and they're not trying to go around and find their way out, and they're being open and honest and transparent. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Well, Ryan, this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot from you. I imagine our listeners have too. And just your philosophy on life, the books that you've read. It's just been a wonderful conversation. So thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.